What's going on, everybody? Culturedog yet again here with another top 10 80s list. We're getting close. Once this week is done, next week is going to be the finale. So all your favorite heavy hitter categories from comedies and sci-fi and horror, it's all going to be there. So it's going to be nothing but net. You're going to love it. It's going to be a good wrap up. And then, I've got plenty of ideas and viewer requests for concepts for future seasons or what have you of this whole concept. So it's going to be a good time, perpetually. But we have to do something a little bit, not really different, but a little bit different, at least in terms of global cinema. I have to do the foreign film list, which is more comical as time progresses, and people, generally watch films from all over the place. But back in the 80s, there was still that old cinematic caveman way of thinking that Hollywood made the movies, and occasionally the rest of the world also made some movies, and we would every once in a while give them a little bit of a golf clap for being foreign films. And sometimes we would even show them over here. Sometimes, if we were lucky, in their original language with subtitles, but then too many times they were also just dubbed poorly into English. But it is funny what constitutes as foreign films, especially when you're a film fan into genre films and action films, etc. So I'm actually going to break off a whole segment of this for martial arts films in general. So that's going to be like a mixture of Hong Kong and American films. And maybe even beyond. But so that's going to splinter off. But this is going to also include some films that would also tend to land on the horror end of thing. Because it's funny, because traditionally, if you are a snooty film goer, you would talk about how you didn't go to the Cineplex, you only went to the art house. And you liked the foreign films. So I actually knew a lot of those people. And just talking about film in general and cinema, and occasionally rubbing elbows with people that were a little snootier than myself. Occasionally they would be like, "Oh, I like French films. Oh, I particularly love Italian cinema." And I'm like, "I do too. I hope you like Fulci, motherfucker." Sharks and zombies, bitches. So there's going to be a little bit of that mixture here. It's going to be a little cinema couture and a little just dirty, trashy gore. You're going to love it. It's going to be fun. Number 10, keeping it Italian, with Demons, a film from Lamberto Bava, Mario Bava's son, also in conjunction with Dario Argento, and it's very 80s and awesome. And it's in that period when Jolly and this is even beyond that. This is more like supernatural, crazy cinema that Dario Argento paved the way for with some films earlier. And this one takes place in Germany and is too cool because it's a film about film. It's about a girl in Berlin who encounters this film screening at this killer movie theater. And it's, the sneak preview of this, horror movie. And little does she know, and the rest of the people watching the film, that it's this weird kind of demonic instance with, and there's all sorts of interesting kind of nonsensical bits of sinister behavior. And you don't quite know what's going on or who is running the show with this thing. But in any way, there's a cursed film and a cursed object, essentially, and the film is about these kids breaking into Nostradamus's tomb and discovering this curse. And then meanwhile there's a mask inside the actual premises of the film house that can scratch someone that puts it on and somehow imbue them with demonic properties after that. And there's a great bit with a pimp and his prostitutes, and one of them turns into a zombie, and all sorts of, it's like a little bit of a slice of life of all these different types of people watching the film. And, of course, there's a group of rowdy teens, and, people think it's just going to be a date night, and it turns out to be a fight for their lives. Meanwhile, outside of the cinema, there's this really over-the-top group of, bodybuilder punks and this one girl, and there's lots of cocaine usage, and, in fact, the one guy, he's got a Coca-Cola can with cocaine in it, So it's real just fun and playing with pop culture. And they get to the venue, and everyone inside the venue's fighting for their lives, and one dude rides a freaking motorcycle up and down the aisles while, decapitating zombie or demons or whatever you want to call them, the titular demons of the film. But it's got this weird mix of like kind of new wave sensibilities and heavy metal sensibilities. So there's like some Go West on there, but then there's Accept, Fast as a Shark, and like Motley Crue, and it's just, and Saxon on the soundtrack. So it's got a good heavy metal soundtrack, and Demons. It's too cool. Check out. There's plenty of. I think Blue Underground's got a nice Blu-ray of it, or I think they do. And there's plenty of Anchor Bay releases on DVD that you can dig up. Some of them are non-anamorphic, but in any way, shape, or there's even I think a Rowan Laserdisc, which you should get if you ever trip across one in the wild. Demons, number 10. Number 9 is an HK film, but it's not necessarily martial arts based, so it's going on this list. It's called A Chinese Ghost Story. And it's funny because I was getting into a lot of HK cinema in the 90s, and this was one of the ones that I saw a little bit too late, but it has a real like kind of 80s vibe, more so, I don't know, than a lot of the other product from the 80s that I was watching, like old Chow Yun Fat films, etc. But this one, has Leslie Chung, who's, Candlepop superstar, as a debt collector who's not really doing a great job, and finds himself staying in the night in this creepy inn out in the middle of nowhere. And Joey Wong is in there, so there's hot ladies going on, and Yuma shows up as this Taoist priest who lets him know that, he's been trucking with ghosts like the entire time he's been out here. So not only that are these like super hot lady ghosts there, but there's also a tree demon that's like running the show and keeping them all hostage. So it's got this really cool, crazy story that's got, one foot in cultural history and the other foot in, supernatural cinema and craziness. I still quote it all the time because the monk goes running around and he has these, prayer papers that he kind of uses as spells essentially. And he's got this cool phrase, "Poya Polemi," that he uses, and he like slaps these like papers onto, ghosts as they explode or whatever. It's a lot of fun, but it's funny. I remember watching it for the first time, and I was like, "This is '80s." Like I should have been watching this around the same time I was watching Lady Hawk and Labyrinth and all those films. So even though I didn't see it in the '80s proper, it is it's one of those classic. Choi Hawk produced it. It's definitely a very '80s film, and it felt like 80s to me, so it was a bit of a time machine viewing. Like when I saw it the first time, I felt like I was transported back into 1986 or 87. I think it was 86 when it came out. So that I'm kind of breaking the rules a little bit because I saw it in the 90s. But A Chinese Ghost Story. It's 80s to me. Number 8, yes, Lucio Fulci. We have to do it. And so many choices, but I'm going with The Beyond. And The Beyond is insane. It's a fever dream, essentially, based on this concept that there are 7 gates of hell, and that one of them might be in the basement of this building in Louisiana, and these people that are buying it and fixing it up and encountering all this creepiness going on. But it also uses some of the locations in the southern United States to amazing effect, including that impossibly long bridge. It's just really just creepy, intense photography, and these crazy images that nobody outside of Italy is going to conjure. It's Fulci at his most like feverish, and that's kind of what I love about it. And it kind of turns into a full bore zombie film at a certain part of the film. It's just a treat for the senses. It's like a Terrence Malick film of horror. Like, don't go into it looking to understand everything that's going on. Just let it wash over you and carry you along with its insanity. So The Beyond. It's too cool. Number 7 is Luc Besson's The Big Blue, also known as Le Grand Bleu, which it was a tough one because I had to choose between a few other Luc Besson films, including Le Dernier Combat, which is really cool. But I didn't see that until much later, and The Big Blue I saw properly in the 80s, and then I kind of fell in love with it a little deeper, so to speak, later after learning more about it and seeing the director's cut and all that stuff. But no, I remember having fond memories of it, seeing the American cut with the Bill Conti score here in the States. So it was just even more delightful to discover like letterbox copies on Laserdisc. Japan released a few different versions, one with and one without subtitles. But yeah, Rosanna Arquette's in it as an insurance agent who encounters a free diver. It's based on real characters, but some of them, like Jean Reno's character, his name's been changed and it's been largely messed with and fictionalized. But Jacques Mayol is the freediver that it's loosely based on, and Rosanna Arquette is his girlfriend in the film, and Jean Reno is his buddy Enzo, who's also his main competition. And so it's got all these interesting character pieces and some romance and some fun. There's even like a little bit of a dolphin heist going on within the film, but there's so many great bits shot in Greece. So cinematography is fantastic, and it's nice hearing the original version with the Eric Serra score as well. But I mean, I love them both. I still have, I think, the Big Blue on VHS. I should probably get a Laserdisc copy of it anyways. I don't know, I think it was properly letterboxed over here. But either way, any way you can take it, I really love the film. And yeah, so obviously Rosanna Arquette's speaking English, but there's a lot of the film in French. And yeah, but get it anyways, even if it's the unsubtitled version from Japan. Number 6 is Dario Argento's Tenebrae. Again, I had quite a few to choose from if I'm going to Argento films. And I should have probably technically chosen Phenomena, because that was the one I was aware of in the 80s proper. But Tenebrae was actually the first Argento film I watched. So therefore it kind of wins on that. Yeah, I don't, even though I didn't see it until the 90s. So it is what it is, and I have to kind of make these calls the last minute. And I do enjoy it more than Phenomena. Phenomena. Yeah, so I chose it for that reason. I do also love Inferno, especially for the insane visuals and the dreamlike kind of nature of it. But yeah, Tenebrae is fantastic, and it's a very Stephen King-esque story about a writer whose fiction is becoming a reality as he's on a trip to Italy and people start dying in the fashion of his stories. So Tony Franciosa's too cool as the writer in question, and John Saxon's also in there. And yeah, it just keeps you guessing with all these other characters that are mysterious on the sidelines, and it's not as colorful as Inferno and Suspiria, but so it's more of a giallo and very it's a little more earthy, even more so than Bird with Crystal Plumage, which had these kind of stark white moments a lot in the film and the art exhibition building and all that stuff. So not too far afield from Cat of Nine Tails and all that stuff, but it's like, what if, and it's essentially like, what if the guy that made Cat of Nine Tails and Deep Red suddenly started making crazy movies like Suspiria and then went back to the giallo, and that's what you get with Tenebrae, and that's exactly what happened. But Daria Nicolodi also in there. I remember seeing bits of it. It was called Unsane for a while, and I remember when I was getting into Video Search in Miami for getting bootleg tapes, they would send you, when you joined their group, this little videotape with compilations of all the stuff they thought you should be buying, like Jean Rollin films and all sorts of cool things. And one of the moments in there is the wall painting scene, I'll just call it that, from Tenebrae. And I was like, Jesus, I need to get this film. And yeah, I saw it and I just loved it. Yeah, it's got so much going for it and fantastic. And the soundtrack, it's not technically Goblin proper, but it's running in my head right now as I'm thinking that cool like vocoder effect, and it's got this amazing non-stop shot with this camera going around and through and like every way possible in this one building, this one apartment, and gotta love Tenebrae. Number 5 is Das Boot, a film that, yes, I knew about very well in the 80s. This was celebrated here in the States, and it was one of those cases where you would hear about foreign films, and they were actually presented as something you would want to watch, as opposed to something for grandpas or grandmas, as foreign films were usually received here in the States before then. This was a U-boat action adventure film from Wolfgang Petersen, and it's very complicated because a lot of people think it's a miniseries, and yes, has a lot of footage that was later repurposed and turned into a miniseries, but it was a theatrical film originally, and it's been released so many different times. It was released in Germany and the United States, and then turned into a miniseries, which has also been released, and then it was recut into a director's cut and re-released in the 90s. I've got both of those, the theatrical and the director's cut, on Laserdisc. Unfortunately, they're rotters a lot of times because DADC USA pressed both of them here in the States. But yeah, Jürgen Prochnow is great in it, and even though it's asking American viewers to watch the exploits of these submariners and feel empathy for them, you do. It's just like a war is hell type picture, and there's different factions on the submarine, some that are a little bit burnt out by the war and not that interested in fighting the war, and then some younger gung-ho types that are on the ship, and it's got everything you'd want from a submarine movie. Moments of victory, moments of terror, bits where you have to submerge beyond the stats of the ship has been tested for. It's great, and pick up a copy there. I'm sure there's some version available somewhere near you. Number 4 is Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire. I was vaguely aware of this film. I also technically did not see it until the 90s, where I rented it on VHS. But it does have enough of a powerhouse of 80s-ness at its core that it gets inserted into this list, even though I saw it too late. But again, at the time it came out, I wasn't able to drive myself places, so I was really at the mercy of my parents, and they weren't rushing off. They would probably go see it now, but at the time they weren't rushing off to see German films about angels. But now I'd be like, hey, there's a cool film from Wim Wenders. You should go see it. So it took me a little bit longer to experience some of these films. But Bruno Ganz is great in it, as this angel who falls in love with Solveig Domartin's trapeze artist, and decides that he wants to ditch his angelic nature and shed his wings and experience humanity. And Peter Falk also shows up in it, unexpectedly. It's a beautiful film, uses Berlin to its fullest, and not in the usual kind of cliched, like Suspiria fashion, where it's super drenched in rain and depressing at all times. Though the film does use great black and white and color imagery and bounces back and forth. And it's the move that the remake City of Angels should have used. They really should have had the balls to make the opening of the film in black and white. It really helps the viewer tap into the reality of the angel's experience and how it is essentially akin to, even though there's more, there's he has now also a sense of taste and all the senses, but at least being able to express part of that with the color and the black and white cinematography is it goes a long way. Plus, it had Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds at a club, and there's like From Her to Eternity in there. That was the first time I heard that song. So it's got the music, it's got the vibe. It's I enjoyed the sequel Far Away So Close as well too, even though it's a totally different vibe going on in there. But Wings of Desire, it's awesome. And there's Criterion Collection versions out there. I've got it on Laserdisc. You can make it happen. Make it happen. Number 3 is Kagemusha, a film from Akira Kurosawa. I should also have Ron on this list because Ron is like the bigger, heavier hitter of the period. But Kagemusha wins because it was the first Kurosawa film I saw. And Ron had an impact on me too, because I clearly remember going to see films at the cinema house. Like occasionally they would show replays of things like Blade Runner and Close Encounters, etc. And so I would go there to see those, and I would see all the ads for the up and coming art house films in the lobby. And I clearly remember seeing a huge poster for Ron in there, and I'm like, what? Why is George Lucas involved in this? Why is Francis Ford Coppola involved in this? And then that led me down the path of learning the connection between Lucas and Kurosawa, and then by the time I saw Kagemusha, which was, I rented the old 2 VHS cassette copy from, my friend was working at a video store in town. And I would go in there, and he would, let you go into the adult section or do whatever you want. And then he would rent me movies, and like, if you had a teenage friend that worked someplace, chances are they were either hooking you up with something for free or something like that. He would just rent me these movies, and then like I would get to keep them essentially. The place went out of business pretty quickly. I wonder why. But yeah, he rented me Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and this, and I still have the cassettes kicking around somewhere because he's just like, no, I didn't really put it in the system. Yeah, you can keep them. So I had my ill-begotten goods, and it's probably a crime. Hopefully the statute of limitations is over. So yeah, I went home, and so by this time I knew the lore about the connection between the Hidden Fortress and Star Wars and Seven Samurai's impact on Lucas, etc. So it was that period where I was trying to expand my boundaries a little bit, and having experienced crazy films like Eraserhead and Brazil at that point, I'm like, all right, there's more going on in the cinema beyond the Spielberg stuff and the George Lucas stuff, and so there's got to be some more interesting things I should watch, but I didn't exactly know what I was getting. So this happened a lot with music too, which is, and I don't really have a problem with it. It's that you start exploring the things that influence the artist you're into, and you come at them like you expect it to sound or feel in terms of a film exactly like what copied it. But then you get something else entirely. So it could either come off as a bit of a disappointment, but obviously being a big Metallica fan at the time led me into the arms of bands like Faith No More, which don't sound anything like Metallica. But you learn to appreciate Faith No More for what Faith No More has to bring to the table. So in terms of this, I'm like, well, this is another film from that same director. So I had myself like semi-convinced that even though there was no direct connection, no correlation at all between this film and Star Wars, because Lucas had put his name on it alongside, again, Francis Ford Coppola, and they convinced 20th Century Fox to help finance it, because he was part of it, that this was somehow going to be like a part of the Star Wars puzzle, and this was going to be like Star Wars, but it's set in feudal Japan. And yeah, it turned out to be an Akira Kurosawa film, which is fantastic. And so it was a crash course in Kurosawa, and allowed me to appreciate what it was instead of what I wanted it to be, at the rental shop. And the title's a little bit misleading because it's Kagemusha, Shadow Warrior, but it's really not talking about that. It's talking about a political decoy, and it's about this daimyo who is leading the Takeda clan and is injured, and the concept is that, well, early on they see this downtrodden peasant man who looks just like the head of the Takeda clan, and they decide, well, we could maybe use him as a double. So when he's injured, they realize, well, maybe we can put this guy as a full-time shadow warrior, a shadow of the deceased head of the clan, and fool everybody because the clan's possibly going to fall apart at any minute and is besieged. And yeah, there's some great bits which require a lot of patience, which is cool. With snipers and things like that. It's fun seeing like a sniper scene and a scene set in feudal Japan. So it's not just all guys in samurai garb battling with swords directly on the battlefield. There's a lot more going on, but yeah, it's Kurosawa's color period, so there's some gorgeous stuff, especially with the battle standards, the flags waving in the breeze, and the gorgeous costumery. And it's a real effective film, and it's just cool. It's interesting seeing this character that comes up from nothing and is given this position of power, but under false pretenses, and it's all a sham, but is it? And he starts to impersonate this guy, and yeah, it's a real fascinating film. It was definitely worth that fake rental back in the day. Number 3, Kagemusha. Number 2, a film that also could be settled into the horror side of things, but it's one of the most horrific horror films ever, though it's not gory. And it is George Slusar's, or however you pronounce his name, The Vanishing, which he remade as an American film, but this is the original Dutch film, and it's amazing. It's so tense, and it still freaks me out to this day. I mean, I do a lot of traveling, And I hit a lot of rest stops, and this film always has me worried about my wife when she just goes to grab a candy bar or something, or go to the bathroom at a rest stop. And it's a film about obsession and not letting go, and that desire to need to know something. But it also has, on the flip side of the main character, whose life is kind of torn apart by this moment, the guy who perpetrated the moment and how insane he is, and how he's not your typical movie villain. He's a very disturbingly normal guy who has a normal life and family, and that makes it all the more horrifying. And yeah, along the way, it just keeps ratcheting up the tension, and to, like, past the breaking point, and you just can't take it anymore. And this original film doesn't puss out at the ending like the American version does. So yeah, The Vanishing. And number one, it can only be one thing. Let me take a sip of water. Get ready. Krzysztof Kieslowski's The Decalogue. I know this is technically cheating because it's a 10-part TV series, but two of the parts were expanded into made into films, a short film about killing and a short film about love, which did screen locally at my art house cinema theater. So, it counts as film. And plus, it's so good, it expands beyond the confines of television. And if you love Kubrick, you're going to see like everything you love about Kubrick done better here. At least, if you love Eyes Wide Shut, prepare to see something that's going to smoke that and influenced it. And I know it's a total dick statement to make, but Krzysztof Kieslowski is just so good. He is the master, or was the master, rest in peace, of delivering just bits of quiet, calm dialogue that is as enthralling and gripping as the most intense chase scene or fight scene in an action film. And you find yourself, there's one, the very first part even, with a bit with a young boy, and just a lot of dialogue and dynamic with his father. And as these conversations are going, I literally find myself moving up and literally becoming on the edge of my seat as it's going. It sucks you in so much. So yeah, it's not dynamic camera work and crazy editing. It's all just storytelling and masterful direction and amazing performances. And yeah, it's generally 10 films each about the 10 commandments. And though, yeah, you'll have to kind of figure out how those connections are made as you're watching the film. It's not as obvious as that. But yeah, all tied together with this one housing complex in Poland. And yeah, I just can't say enough great about it. Get that Criterion Collection set when the next Criterion sale hits, at Barnes & Noble or whatever. Not that I'm sponsored by them in any way, shape, or form. But get that half-off sale and get that Decalogue box set, because it's amazing. I had an older DVD set, which I paid far too much for. Had I known that Blu-ray set was gone, Blu-ray wasn't even out at the time when I got it on DVD. But so yeah, I never did see this properly in the 80s. It wasn't really available here in the States, and even by the time a short film about killing, I think, was the first one that hit theatrically over here, that was still as like an art house after the fact situation in the 90s. So yeah, again, I didn't even know the Decalogue existed in the 80s proper, but it is just so damn good and so influential, and Kozlowski is just, a total master, and it's all on display in this film and or series of short films. Yeah, so I ended off with something. I started off with Demons. I ended with Decalogue. So I feel like that's a good broad spectrum of foreign film to add on this 80s top 10 list. Sorry this one was a little bit long, but yeah, I'm getting more long-winded as these progress. But yeah, it is what it is. Deal with it. It's the 80s, man. I'll catch you guys later. Bye.